An American missile defense system battery helped to intercept a Houthi ballistic missile that was launched at Israel from Yemen Friday. It's the first time the system has been used since it was deployed by the U.S. back in October, so several months ago. The Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System was used to try to intercept the missile, and an assessment will determine that success. In a video posted to social media showing the system launching an interceptor, an American soldier can actually be heard saying, quote, 18 years I've been waiting for this. All of this as the back and forth does continue between Israel and the Houthi terror group. Earlier this week, the Houthis took responsibility for an attack on Israel, saying that they were targeting Israel's main international airport. While that missile was intercepted, Israeli officials say at least 18 people suffered minor injuries as they rushed to bomb shelters as the sirens were sounding in the area. A lot to discuss as always, so I do want to bring in Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me as always.
Of course. Well, first off, I want to talk to you about the situation developing there with that American defense system being used. Obviously, right now, it appears that there is an investigation of sorts underway, as there are assessments that will be done to figure out if the American system is actually what intercepted that missile. But how significant is it that this is the first time that has been used?
Well, it's critical. I mean, so the THAAD, as you said correctly, has been deployed to the region since October, but it has not been operational. And so now, for the first time, we've used it. And there are two major takeaways that need to be obviously looked at. One is for Israeli adversaries to actually know that they're actually American boots on the ground who are actually working with the Israelis, and it's not just words, there are actually deeds behind that. And that is actually a very critical aspect. And the U.S. indeed committed to standing by Israel, but obviously, from having an actual statement, as far as the threat versus actually having American troops on the ground who are actually operating the THAAD system itself, the battery, is indeed a step, as far as an acceleration. And the Houthis and Iran and Iranian proxies in general should take note of that. The other part, which is also very interesting as well, is that usually any kind of American system, the U.S. decides when it operates the system. They're the ones who are giving the orders. Here, in a very unique situation, actually, they were taking the orders from the Israelis, which is also very unique and shows the collaboration, the fact that really Israel is the one calling the shots, and they're collaborating together, which again, a very unique environment as far as, if you contrast that between areas where we have forces and we had forces in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. It's the U.S. calling the shots. CENTCOM is the one giving the calls on a lot of these aspects as far as intel, as far as operational issues. Here, they're following the Israelis and following Israeli marching orders. That's also very unique from an intelligence standpoint, and also should signal to the Houthis really who's calling the shots. That's another aspect as far as understanding the larger arena at large. And thirdly, and above all, really the fact that there is skin in the game to show that indeed America's enemies are Israel's enemies and vice versa, and they're actually fighting this war together because they know what's at stake here. All of that is part of beyond the actual the successful use of the THAAD system, whether or not actually shut down, whether or not it was the one that intercepted or not. Is less relevant than the fact that we actually have U.S. support on the ground in those very areas. And it's important to note also from a military standpoint, those are exactly the areas where Israel does not have the Iron Dome area. So again, these are part of the missile battery defense systems that are needed to supplement in those areas where there is no Iron Dome. And this also bolsters a larger air defense area that Israel is defending all around.
One thing that's interesting is the IDF said that about 18 people were injured as a result of just running to get to those bomb shelters as the Houthi missile was coming in. Is that kind of a way of life now for folks who are running to those bomb shelters frequently wherever you are in Israel? Of course, we know that a lot of the homes there do have those bomb shelters, but is that something where the sirens are blaring and folks have to just run for safety?
Indeed. I mean, what you've been seeing now for the past few weeks now is you're seeing that these sirens go off every night between 2 to 4 in the morning. Israelis are running to shelters. They're causing a great deal of damage. The projectiles are hurting homes as far as windows and other kind of aspects. The other, from an infrastructural standpoint, the other concern that Israelis, of course, have had is the capability of the Houthis to actually infiltrate center parts of Israel. That is, we're seeing not only the southern areas of Israel, but also the center part of Israel, including Tel Aviv and Jaffa. And as you mentioned correctly, the target here was the Israeli airport. That's no coincidence, given the fact that when Israel attacked Yemen a few days ago, they indeed targeted the airport. So there is indeed a larger concern here, and this has been a concern, which you and I have discussed since the beginning of the war, is a disruption of air patterns, and the fact that to date, really, when we're talking about commercial airlines, they're really, with the exception of the Israeli airline El Al, no other airline really is flying to Israel commercially wise. That is hurting Israeli economically when it comes to tourism, which of course is non-existent, and just basic back and forth commerce that are using through the airport. Israel has been significantly hurt by that, and even American airlines have been delaying their resuming flights to Israel as a result of the uncertainty of the war. So when you're targeting these airports, and again, these are real threats, there is a clear message behind that as far as disrupting the economics, which Israel has already been significantly impacted by since the war began, now over a year plus. And this is really a major concern as far as what recovery will look like when Israel even gets to that point in a post-war scenario.
We know that the Houthis have been firing a lot of missiles, especially over the last week or so. This has been an ongoing situation where, as I mentioned, those sirens have been blaring. We also know that a Houthi missile was able to kind of strike Tel Aviv. There was a portion there that was hit. There was an attempt to intercept it, but it didn't happen. So are there concerns, despite this U.S. weapon that's being used, plus just the aerial defense system in general, are there concerns that a heavily populated city of Israel could actually be struck by one of these missiles?
100%. I mean, I think, look, the fact is that ideologically speaking, it's important to note and remind your viewers that, of course, the ideology that we're dealing with when it comes to the Houthis is analogous to the same one Israel has been fighting with Hamas and Hezbollah. They are all part. This is all part of the larger multi-front war that Israel has been fighting with Iran. They got nothing to lose when it comes to their ideology. Their goal is destruction. They are standing by. If you look at Houthi social media, they're talking about the fact that they are standing by their brethren in Palestine. They're standing by their brethren in Gaza. They are committed to fighting this war. And so, like with Hamas and Hezbollah, they got lives. They don't care about the value of life. I mean, so from their perspective, any kind of disruption, any kind of penetration of missiles, which they've been doing and throwing whatever they have, whatever they have, including the kitchen sink, they're throwing at the Israelis. The bigger concern is, which is really, which from a logistical standpoint, as well as the ability to penetrate central parts of Israel that you mentioned, is the fact that, and this has been a major concern for the Israelis, is that they are getting rearmed by the Iranians with longer range missiles capability, and that is allowing them to penetrate the Israeli airspace and hit these more larger central parts of Israel, which can cause larger damage, can cause destruction. And let's not forget that in tandem the war on the other side of the border is not over. So the Israelis are still dealing with Hamas. They're still dealing with areas of Judea and Samaria. They're still dealing with the north when it comes to Lebanon, and of course the Syria post-Assad. So again, the goal here from their perspective, from the Iranian kind of a larger axis, is to create as much havoc and to put as much pressure on the Israelis in order to see, are they going to succumb to any pressure? Which is why, going back to my earlier point, the fact that we actually have THAAD and American boots on the ground in this respect is very unique and should be more than symbolic, that the fact that actually the U.S. is standing by Israel.
We talked about the U.S. and Israel just now here, but we also know that Netanyahu spoke and said that it's not just a fight between Israel and the Houthis. It is a fight because the Houthis are a danger to the entire world. So aside from the U.S., do we see anyone else, any other country coming out to help in the fight to eliminate the Houthis?
I think we're going to see more. The fact of the matter is, economically, which I think is more alert to your point, is the fact that anybody who uses and this the amount of commerce in the Red Sea. And let's not forget, of course, that Saudi Arabia, for example, has a border with Yemen. They've been a pain in their butts for a very, very long time. And from their perspective, this is significant. This is their war on their terror when it comes to the terrorism that they're dealing with on that border. And there's been discussions, of course, back and forth since the war has begun about, more normalized ties with the Saudis. Commerce in the Red Sea, and if you've seen this being disrupted by attacks as far as shipments going back and forth, that's all part of their goal. And I think that any country who's impacted by that, as far as, the normalization as far as commerce, should be impacted. And should be standing up with the Israelis. We saw it back in April when the Jordanians and the Saudis and other countries are getting involved. I think that any countries in those areas will be joining the Israelis, at least even message-wise, that they stand with the Israelis is unique. But we've not seen more boots on the ground by these armies. I'd like to see more. I think that they have a responsibility, given the fact that they understand that. It's important. One more, other point that is worthy of note. The fact that the Saudis are indeed involved, and should be seeing more involvement by them, and we hope for that, is the fact that the Saudis and the other countries in the area, the other Sunni countries, that are not Islamists, do understand that Iran represents the greatest destabilizing factor in the region. And so when they're fighting with the Israelis, they're fighting Iran. And so I think when you're talking about separating between the actual Arab Sunni stable states versus the Islamist terrorist organizations, they understand what the threat of this ideology means to them at large, and they do understand what Israel is fighting. So I would like to see more of that, but it's yet to be seen. And if this amplifies and accelerates, especially now, I mean, it's no coincidence that these things are happening during the holidays, and now we are, a little, sure, we're very, less than, a little bit over 3 weeks before the inauguration. The timing here is no coincidence at large, and they are testing the waters, especially from how the U.S. is going to respond in this lame duck period.
All right, Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and break it down. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, I appreciate it. As always, obviously, things are changing on a hourly and a daily basis, so always at your service.
They definitely are. Thank you again for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.